not. But again, thank you for showing up this morning. Over the last couple of days, I've talked about glute amnesia, what it is, and why it's a problem, and why you should be training your glutes pretty specifically so that you don't have a lot of the trouble that I talked about yesterday. So if you didn't catch part 1 and 2, you can go back through my Facebook Lives and go through each of those so that today might make a little more sense to you as to why I'm doing any of this to begin with, because glute training is so very, very important. So like I said, today is part 3, discovering whether or not you actually are experiencing some of the problems with glutes. Just so you know, you're not alone in that experience. If through the examples that I give to you today of how you can kind of check where you're at, just know you're not alone. There are so many people, even advanced athletes, are dealing with glute inactivation, like just glutes that have amnesia, glutes that have forgotten how to play nice with the other muscles. Because like I said, they are lazy and they will let any other muscle step up and do the work. They are not picky. So just know you're not alone. When I had started lifting weights, it was probably about, well, now I guess it's about 3 years ago that I actually started lifting somewhat heavily. And all of that was going great. I just thought, this is fantastic. Look at all the progress I'm making. It's awesome. And then I started to have low back pain. And I noticed it when I was doing just very simple mobility drills where you're like lying on the floor and you're just swishing your knees from side to side, or the leg pullover where you have one leg over to the side, or glute raises or glute bridges, they're called, where you just basically are extending your hips from a flat position on the floor to that angled position in a bridge, and especially during single leg glute bridges. I started to notice all this back pain, and I thought, I don't know what's really going on here, but clearly I need to do more mobility drills, or I need to stretch more. I thought that was the problem. It wasn't until it started creeping into nearly every part of my day. Like, I'd be out shopping for just a little while, like maybe an hour, like grocery store shopping, and my low back would be hurting. And like I said yesterday, if you were listening in on yesterday's, that's not the way to live. I was only 48, 47, 48, somewhere in that range when I started to feel that back pain, and I thought, this is not right. So what do you do when you have back pain, or what do you do when you have any pains that you think are muscle related? You go to a massage therapist, which is something I did. I went to my massage therapist. She recommended I see a chiropractor. I saw the chiropractor. She recommended I see a physiotherapist. And thus, I was led into physiotherapy, where I discovered, to my horror, that I had inactive glutes. My glutes had amnesia. And one of the tests that she did, which you need a partner for this one, but this is a good way to test whether or not your glutes are activating optimally, because they do activate a little bit. You know, sometimes they step in and help the hamstrings out. But if you have a lazy butt, it's not going to give the full power that it would give if it was truly activating. So what she had me do was lie flat on a table. I was on my stomach. So I'm on my stomach. I'm lying on the table. I had to lift my leg up high behind me. So just that alone, just lifting my leg from that supine position, lifting it up, was hurting my low back. And then she told me, and I was like, oh no, here we go. She told me to not allow her to push my leg down. And I was really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And as you can imagine, my leg went down like a hot knife through butter. Like, there was absolutely no resistance whatsoever. And yeah, that's when she told me, you have a lazy butt. She didn't say it quite in those terms, but that's essentially what she was saying. And so I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't rely on my excuses of, well, I'm able to deadlift and I'm able to squat and I'm able to do, you know, all the leg curling. All of that I'm able to do. I couldn't ignore the fact that my glutes were no longer activating. So I got right on it, and that is why I'm talking to you today, because I discovered this amazing thing that so many people do not even realize that they have, and it could really benefit you in your training if you understood the importance of getting rid of this problem. So that is why I decided to do this series at all, because I think a lot of people don't know. I know some of the clients that I've worked with don't know. And then we get into exercises and they realize, oh, you know, my hip kind of hurts, or my knee started hurting, or, you know, I got this little pain in my shoulder, and it comes back to glutes. And so, yeah, I have to revamp some of their training to really address this problem. So I figure if my clients are experiencing it, if I experienced it, if my friends have experienced it, like the friend I was talking to you about who was lying on the floor and just barely moving to try to activate her core again and her glutes again and all of that. So many people are experiencing it and don't even know it. So thus, I'm talking to you today. So that physio test was one that you can perform, but like I said, you do need a partner. Another way you can tell is if, this is very simple, and you can probably do this one even if your glutes aren't activating optimally. So from a standing position, if you squeeze both of your butt cheeks together as hard as you can, stop and then just squeeze one side and then squeeze the other and hold. If you can't maintain that hold on one side and then switch to the other and maintain the hold, it is likely that your glutes are not activating optimally, even if you're able to get a little squeeze in. So that's another test you can do. Something else you could try is glute bridges. Just standard glute bridges on the floor. Are you able to do that without your hamstrings activating? They're going to activate a little bit, but they shouldn't be the ones controlling that motion. So it should really just be your glutes that you're feeling that burn in. So when you're in a glute bridge and you're up and you're squeezing your bottom as tight as you can, and you keep, you know, you go down and you come back up and you go down and you come back up. So through your repetitions, where do you start to feel that burn? Do you start feeling it in your hamstrings? If you do, your glutes are not activating at an optimal level. So that's another test you can try. And within that, you have the single leg, which some of you, you might be able to do glute bridges without your hamstrings activating, or, you know, they will participate because they are part of hip extension. But if they're not burning on a regular bridge, you could also try single leg glute bridges and see, you might find that you have one side that is stronger than the other, which is just as much of a problem as having both sides of your glutes not activating. So try some single leg stuff as well. So single leg glute bridges. Another one you can try is a pistol squat. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but basically your leg is out and you squat down to about 90 degrees and then come back up. If you cannot do that, your glutes are not activating at an optimal level. Or if you are very unbalanced and you can't actually maintain that position, that's also an indication that you could use some glute strengthening. Not saying they're not activating at all, but maybe not optimally, and it can cause you problems. So all the single leg stuff, single leg pistol squats, like I said, or a skater squat where you have your leg up behind you and you squat down to that 90 degrees. And if your knees cave in at all, you are also having some glute strength problems. If you're doing regular squats or like a back squat where you have weight on your shoulders and you squat down, if your knees are caving in or you feel imbalanced as you're going down, like one side comes down better than the other, you're not as level, it's likely that you have glute activation problems. Another thing you can try, I know there's so many things, but it's important that you figure this out and that you deal with it and you recognize, hey, I have this. It's not that hard to fix. I just need to know what to do and how to focus my training. So another thing you can try is very similar to the test that that my physiotherapist did for me, where I was lying, you know, on my stomach, and I had my leg up behind me, and she pushed, and it went down like a hot knife through butter. You can do a very similar thing, except you can do it by yourself. So you would be lying on your stomach. You have one hand on your glute, probably the opposite hand. This hand would go onto, I know it's a little awkward trying to show you standing up, but you would put your hand, one on your glute and one on your hamstring, and then do the same thing where you try to lift your leg up behind you. If you feel your hamstring activate first, like it's going to be the first thing that you feel the pull as you're trying to lift that leg up, your glutes are not firing in the correct order. So there's also that as an issue. If your hamstrings take over first, your glutes are not activating at an optimal level. They may pull in, they may be like, oh, all right, you want me to join in on this little activity? Okay, I will. But if your hamstrings are activating first, this particular exercise or test, I suppose you should call it, is a great way to figure that out. So you're lying on your stomach. I see some people joining. Just want to say, good morning, Lynn. Good morning, Kelly. I don't know how much you guys have heard or missed, but I'm just kind of running through some of the tests that you could do to check if your glutes are actually activating at an optimal level. So I'm sorry if some of this becomes repetitive, but as people are joining, I may repeat myself. So the test I'm talking about right now, if you're just joining us, is where you're lying on your stomach. You're going to have one hand on your glute, the one that you're going to test, and one hand on your hamstring. It's a little easier when you're lying down to do this, but you want to have one hand on your glute, one on your hamstring, and then you're going to try to lift your leg up behind you. What you feel activate first, if it's your hamstrings, that's a problem, because your glute should be the first thing that you feel tighten up, that you feel contract, not your hamstrings. So test both sides in that way and see, do you have one side activating well and the other side maybe not so well? That's also a problem. You want to make sure that you're addressing both sides of your glutes. So there's that test, and I think that one's a great one to do for yourself because you don't need a partner for it. Whereas the one I was talking about earlier at physio, where I was lying flat and I had my leg up, and she said, don't let me push your leg down, and my leg went down like a hot knife through butter, like absolutely nothing. It was so shocking to me. I was like, what in the world? And it was the same on both sides. One side was a little bit stronger. My right one, tiny, tiny, tiny bit of resistance. My left, not at all. And you might find that that's the same for you. So any single leg stuff, like I said, I am going to get repetitive here because I see people are joining. Any single leg activities where you're doing either like a single leg deadlift or the single leg pistol squat or skater squat, if there's any swaying in your balance, if there's any pain in your low back or your knees, anything like that, and you don't feel your glute actually activating and you can't get yourself back up from those squats without like putting your leg back down again, those are all signs that you have inactive glutes or lazy glutes or inhibited glutes or dormant glutes. Whatever name you want to put on it, it's not something to ignore. Because like I said yesterday, if you were here for yesterday's training, you can't ignore it because it will eventually affect other areas of your body, which will then affect other areas of your life, and certainly any kind of training that you want to do. It's going to affect it all. Good morning, Janine. All right. Sorry, I'm just going to check and see who else might be joining us. I hope you guys are finding this helpful because I seriously was so shocked to find out that, you know, I've been doing all these exercises for almost, 2 years? Like the deadlifts and all the heavy lifting and all the woohoo, you know, I'm doing so awesome. And my glutes weren't really activating. So I was essentially wasting my time on trying to build glute strength and power by not actually having my glutes activating. So huge problem. And like I said, caused the back pain, which, you know, I'm still getting my glutes to activate at an optimal level. I have not arrived yet, but I know enough at this point to be helpful to someone else. And that's really what this glute training is all about. I want to help. I don't want my friends and my family and people that I meet to be dealing with this and to have struggles getting up off the floor in their age, or falling and breaking bones, or any of that stuff that can happen when we just aren't focused in on our glute training. So that is why I decided to do this. And yeah, just gonna, yes, hi Janine, stone dead glutes. Kelly, you do not have stone dead glutes anymore. I know they're working. I've seen the progress. But something else about glute training is it takes a bit. I mean, it's not going to be overnight. And I am going to cover that kind of information tomorrow. Like, what can you expect from glute training? What should you really be focusing in on? How to address some of these problems you might be facing with your glute training, whatever that may be. So there's a lot of information tomorrow kind of leading into what to do about it. So I've told you about the problem itself. I've expressed over and over again how important it is to address it. And now today I've covered different ways that you can test. So just to recap, you can do the hip extension where you're lying on the table and someone pushes your leg down while you're trying to keep it up. So there's that. There's the hand on your glute, hand on your hamstring, kick back while you're lying down. Don't try to do this standing up. Not as effective. You want to be lying down so that you have a hard surface to push from. And if you feel your hamstring activate first, that's a problem. Any single leg stuff that you might be doing, if there's any wobbling or you can't actually get back up or you are losing your balance in those exercises, that's a problem. If you're noticing, like, say you're doing donkey kicks and you notice on one side, you can, you know, just whip out 20 reps before you start to feel any kind of burn or hamstring burn. But on the other side, it's only 10 before you start to feel that. That's also a problem. So any imbalances in your glutes is just as much of a problem as having both of them not activating. So yeah, something really important to keep in mind. Like, one side can be fantastic, and you might even notice in the mirror, because I do for myself, I have one side that actually sits a bit higher than the other. And as far as like fat displacement, it's about the same for me on both sides of my glutes. Really, I just have one muscle that's more activating than the other, or activates more optimally than the other side. So I actually have a little bit of a more of a sag on one side. You might notice that too. Those things can be fixed. Okay, bone structure, you can't change. But the kinds of things that I'm talking about, like your muscle strength, the size of that muscle, like building muscle there, so you actually have more of a roundness and a firmness to your booty, and fat. Those are things that you can handle through glute training, regardless of genetics. So like I said in the very first video, don't let genetics be the end-all be-all of, you know, your ideas about glute training. However, I did say to keep them in mind. And why you want to keep them in mind is that you don't want to have unrealistic expectations about your glute training and what you can accomplish. If you have a bone structure that forces your glutes to be in a shape, you know, that you think is different from the perfect round shape that you're wanting, just know that you can't change your bone structure. So meet yourself where you're at and don't have these unrealistic expectations. And don't compare yourself to someone else's glutes, because we are all built differently. Yes, we have generally the same things. You know, we all have bones, we all have glutes, we all have particular muscles, but not everybody's muscles develop in the same way. So just keep that in mind. And that's what I mean by keep genetics in mind. But it shouldn't be like a toss-up, like, oh, it's my genetics, I'm done. I can't really do much about it. You can, and you shall. So that's pretty much what I had for you guys today. If you wouldn't mind commenting below and letting me know if you tried any of these tests. Like I said, there was a bunch of them that I listed there, especially any single leg stuff. And if you feel so inclined or you feel comfortable doing so, let me know how it went. And let me know if I can assist you further in any way. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to be addressing what really to do about it. Like, what should you be focusing in on now that you know the problem? Now that maybe you'll understand that you're having this problem, what can we do about it? So that's really what tomorrow is for, and Friday. So the next 2 days is going to be really about addressing it, how to address it, and if you would like further assistance with it.